Part tres. Continuing on with the reading of the calendar for this next year. We are on month ocho. All right, month ocho. Um, skip some equinoxes and some solstices. I look at the hypocrisy. First of all, there's a difference between hypocrisy and contradiction. Everybody has contradictions. Contradiction is part of the nature of life. It's life. It's nature. Hypocrisy is the denial, the refusal of acknowledging the contradiction. So, yes, I'm being contradictory. I said specifically, you can be mindful of the seasons and everything. And then I didn't even say it. One of the reasons is because some of the writing is very small, and so it's less visible. And given the seasons, given an explanation. But I am going to go back and just say when those are. So if you were mindful, the equinox occurs in the first month of the Holy Earth calendar. So if you just do the general math, every 3 months is a season, in according to the equinox and the solstice. So 3 months after that, in month four, month cuatro would be the solstice, the winter solstice in the north, summer solstice in the south. I'll give the specific day because I'm confident it is here. Interesting. It is and it ain't. It's on month four, month cuatro, week dos, on Shabbat. Uh, so that's effectively when it is. And I know why I didn't read it. So returning back to month ocho. Oh, excuse me, siete. So 3 months after that would be month siete, which is when we can expect the or that when the spring, the northern spring equinox and the southern autumn equinox occurs, month of siete. So the specific date for that is again Shabbat of month siete, week tres of on Shabbat. It actually is listed here. I just didn't read it. So that's the equinox. So that's where we are in terms of seasons. Again, it's very simple. Month one is the equinox month, and after that, every 3 months is equinox, solstice. So that's it. Now we're back to month ocho again. Here we go. The month begins on the first day of the week, Soleil Day, and that includes the observance of Navpad Oli within Jain tradition, King Min, which actually begins the preceding day. It continues on this day, on the Soleil Day, and continues on for one other additional day. And it is Palm Soleil Day, the beginning of High Holy Week within Christian Gregorian calendar. The continuation of Lent as well within Christian Gregorian calendar, and the continuation of the Green Corn Dance awareness within Native tradition. The next day, the numero dos of the week, again concludes King Ming festival within Chinese tradition, and the Mahavir Jayanti is observed within Jain tradition. The next day is Purnima. Day numero tres of the week is Purnima within Hindu tradition, the full moon within respective earth traditions, Upasada within the Buddha tradition, and Lent continues within Christian Gregorian tradition. Day cuatro of the week is the evening of Pesach. The festival of Pesach begins within Israeli tradition, and it's the Jalal feast within Baha'i tradition on that same evening. Interesting. Pesach and Jalal feast coincide with each other this year. And that begins again the Pesach festival, the week-long festival within Israeli tradition. And that next day, day numero cinco of the week, is Holy Thursday within Christian Gregorian tradition. And the counting of the Omer begins the next day on Juma of Israeli tradition, um, continuing with Pesach. It's also Bon Friday within Christian Gregorian tradition as well, as we continue on towards the next week. So on month ocho, week numero dos, the first day of the week is Easter, the high holy day within Christian Gregorian tradition. Pesach continues within Israeli tradition, and the counting of the Omer continues within within Israeli tradition throughout the remainder of the week. And green corn dance awareness continues throughout the week as well. On the second day of the week, Pentecost begins within Christian Gregorian calendar, the counting of Pentecost. And Beshak begins within Nanakshi calendar. The month of Beshak begins within the Nanakshi calendar. Um, and that rounds out the week. On month ocho, week numero tres, the counting of the Omer continues within Israeli tradition. Pentecost continues within Christian Gregorian tradition. Green corn dance awareness continues within native tradition. On day dos of the week is Ardwaish. The month of Ardwaish begins within Zarathustrian tradition. Ridvan, the Holy Week of Ridvan, begins within Baha'i tradition on the second day of the week. And on the third day of the week, Wo, the month of Wo, begins within within Mayan tradition, within native tradition. And the next day, day numero cuatro of the week, is the new moon within respective earth traditions, which is Amavasya within Hindu tradition, Upasada within Buddha tradition. Uh, okay. The month of Sanyu, that's what it is. All right, see it. The month of Sanyu, I should have known that before, begins within Chinese tradition um, on day numero cinco. Just a side note, that's comparatively unusual. Usually, always, the lunar month of the Chinese calendar begins before all the other lunar months. Sometimes it coincides with months, particularly with the Hindu Vikram Samvat calendar, but it's very unusual for the Hindu Vikram Samvat calendar to precede the beginning of the month before the beginning of the month in the Handi Chinese lunar calendar. That might be attributable to some the estimations, but anyways, that's a side note. At the conclusion of the week, uh, Rosh Chodesh, the beginning of the month within the Hebrew calendar, begins. Oh wow! Whoa! Skip this. Backtracking a little bit. On Friday of that month, on Juma, Ramadan begins. The holy month of Ramadan begins within Islamic tradition and the Hijri calendar. Um, and the next day, Rosh Chodesh begins on Shabbat within Israeli tradition, and that rounds out the week. And the next week, month ocho, week numero cinco, the counting of the Omer continues within Israeli tradition. Ramadan continues within Islamic tradition. Pentecost continues within Christian tradition. The green corn dance observance or awareness continues within native tradition, specifically Seminole. Ridvan continues within Baha'i tradition. Um, on the second day of the week, it is Universal Days of Service within the Holy Earth tradition and Mélangé. Also on the second day is the beginning of the month of Jamal, presumably being also including Jamal Feast. But that occurs within the Baha'i calendar, Baha'i tradition. Um, Later in the week, on day cinco of the week, Madyo Zarem festival is observed within Zarathustrian tradition. That continues on for the remainder of the week, and that rounds out the week. And then continuing on to month ocho, week numero cinco. The counting of the Omer continues. It's just one day for the rest of the month concludes on the first day of the week. So the counting of the Omer continues. Um, Ramadan continues. Pentecost within counting of the Omer continues within Israeli tradition. Ramadan continues within Islamic tradition. Pentecost continues within Christian Gregorian tradition. Magyar Zarem continues in the Zarathustrian tradition, and Green Corn Dance Awareness continues within Native Seminole tradition. And on to month numero nueve. It begins on day numero dos of the week. And on that day, counting of the Omer continues within Israeli tradition. Ramadan continues within Islamic tradition. Pentecost continues within um, Christian Gregorian tradition. Madyo Zarem concludes on the second day of the week in Zarathustrian tradition, and Green Corn Dance Awareness continues within within Native Seminole tradition. Later that week, Vesak Puja, the High Holy Day within Buddha tradition, according to certain lineages, occurs on day numero cinco of the week. That also is Purnima within Hindu tradition and Upasada within other lineages of Buddhism. A Buddhist tradition, it's the full moon within respective earth traditions. And on Friday, Juma of that week, the powwow season begins. And so we observe this again with an awareness of Inamaka powwow, Holy Earth, Mother Earth powwow season begins with a native tradition. And to conclude the week, it is the Akshay Tritiya within Jain tradition, which is observed on Shabbat of that week in month Nueve. Also, in saying things, a lot of things again are repeated from week to week, particularly these longer observances. You might say, "Well, we got the picture." Just say it just continues on, but it's beneficial to recite that because, that's what we're going through as a collective, and our communities are observing these. And I don't want. I mean, I'm kind of going fast through it, but I don't want to make light of that. Like these are heavy, intense periods, and so even if it's going in day in after day, day in day out, for a period of a month or whatever. It's like it warrants being said, and I'm not saying every day it's observed throughout the month if that's the case, but I still do it week by week because be mindful of that. So it's relevant. So continuing on, month nueve, week numero dos. The counting of the Omer continues within Israeli tradition. Ramadan continues within Islamic tradition. Pentecost continues within Christian Gregorian tradition, and Inamaka powwow continues within native tradition. So I also will say that when we begin the observance of Inamaka powwow, that's when the observance of the Green Corn Dance Awareness concludes. That also happens on the full moon day, which is Vesak Puja. So that's when the transition kind of occurs in terms of our awareness of these observances. So that all of those can continue within this month nueve, week numero dos. The month of Sip in Mayan calendar begins on day numero dos of the week. The month of Jet begins on the day numero cinco of the week within Sikh tradition. And Azamat feast is held on Shabbat, thereabouts, Shabbat, on in the Baha'i tradition. Continuing on to month nueve, week numero tres. The counting of the Omer continues in Israeli tradition. Ramadan continues within Islamic tradition. Pentecost continues within Christian Gregorian tradition. Powwow, Inamaka powwow continues within native tradition. And later that week on day numero tres, the corridor begins. So the corridor is a Pan-African observance, and it's also an extended observance for a number of months, and there are specific days of observance during the course of that. So I'm going to recite as the corridor continues, and then also the specific days that are observed according or amidst the corridor. So that begins on the third day of the week, and that first day is Umoja, which also commemorates the birth of Malcolm X, Alhaj Malik al-Shabazz. The next day, Khordad, the month of Khordad, begins within Zarathustrian calendar. And later that week on Juma, it is Amavasya, the new month, the new moon within Hindu tradition, and the new moon within respective earth traditions. It's Upasada day within Baha'i traditions. Um, and the next year, excuse me, the next day after that, uh, it is the new month within Chinese tradition. And this actually might be where the leap month occurs because um, yeah, this is the leap month actually within the Chinese calendar. I was a misreading of what I read before. It was different. The number two signified the number of the month rather than the repetition of the month. So this is when the leap month begins within the Chinese calendar. Um, on Shabbat of that week of month nueve, week numero tres of the Holy Earth calendar. The uh, the the um, the new month begins on that day. And then also on that day, the declaration of the Bab is observed within Baha'i tradition. Continuing on to month numero nueve, week numero cuatro, Rosh Chodesh begins on the first day of the week, the new month in Israeli tradition, and the counting of the Omer continues within Israeli tradition. Uh, and uh, the month of Shawwal begins with an Islamic tradition, and it begins it concludes Ramadan, and begins the Eid al-Fitr festival within Islamic tradition. Pentecost for the next 4 days, 4 days. Pentecost continues within Christian Gregorian tradition. The corridor continues within Pan African tradition, and the powwow continues. Inamaka powwow continues within Native tradition. Eid al-Fitr concludes on day numero cuatro of the week. Um, the Ascension of Baha'u'llah is observed within day cinco of the week, and Shavuot is observed within Israeli tradition. Eid al-Fitr concludes within Islamic tradition on the fourth day of the week. Ascension of Baha'u'llah is observed within the Baha'i tradition on day cinco of the week, and Shavuot is observed within Israeli tradition on Juma, the sixth day of the week. And that also concludes the counting of the Omer. Um, and that rounds out the observances that week. And on week nueve, month numero, week numero cinco, Pentecost continues and actually concludes on the first day of the week, which is a Soleil Day. That's when it concludes. Inamaka Powwow continues within Native tradition. The corridor continues within Pan African tradition, and the month of Sots begins within Mayan tradition. And later that week, on the second day of the week, June begins in the Christian Gregorian calendar, the month of June. So there is that. And we've actually gone over an hour now. Month 10 and week numero uno. It begins on day cuatro of the week. And at that point, the Inamaka powwow continues with the native tradition. Corridor continues within Pan African tradition. On the next day, day numero cinco of the week, Nur, the feast of Nur, the month of Nur, begins within or is held within Baha'i tradition. The day after that, it is the full moon within respective earth traditions. That includes Purnima within Hindu tradition, Upasada within Buddhist tradition. And that rounds out the week. Again, every week, Juma, Shabbat, Soleil Day. The next week, month 10, week numero dos, corridor continues within Pan African tradition. Inamaka powwow continues within Native tradition. On the fifth day of the week is Southern Thanksgiving within Holy Earth traditions or Earth tradition, and the day after that is Open Doors Day on Juma within Holy Earth tradition, and that rounds out the week that week. Month 10, week numero tres. Har, the month of Har begins within the Nanakshi calendar. Corridor continues within Pan African tradition. Powwow, Inamaka powwow continues within Native tradition. That continues on to day 6 on Juma, and on that day, day 6 of the week on Juma, the month of Tir begins within Zarathustrian tradition, the Zarathustrian calendar. Also on that same day, Juma, it is Kuji Jagalia, which is a commemoration of Juneteenth within Pan African tradition. And on Shabbat of that week, it is the new moon within respective earth traditions, which includes Amavasya within Hindu tradition, Upasara within Buddha tradition, and the month of Sek begins within the Mayan calendar. And continuing on to month 10, week número 4. The new month of Wu Yu begins within Chinese tradition. Summer solstice is commenced on day uno of the week as well. The next day is Zulqa'dah, the month of Zulqa'dah within Islamic tradition and the Hijra calendar. Inamaka Powwow continues within native tradition. Corridor continues within Pan-African tradition. The next day, on day numero 3 of the week, Rosh Chodesh begins within Israeli tradition, and on that same day, Ramat Uno, the feast, is is held within Baha'i tradition. Later that week, on day numero 5 of the week, it's the Dragon Boat Festival within Chinese tradition, and that rounds out the week. And then on month 10, week numero 5, Corridor continues within Pan-African tradition. Powwow, Inamaka Powwow continues within native tradition. Madhya Shahem, the feast, the festival begins on the second day of the week in Zarathustrian tradition, and it concludes on the fourth day of the week. And on that same day, fourth day of the week, July, the month of July begins in Christian Gregorian calendar. And on that same day, in Pan-African tradition, amidst the corridor, Ujima is held, which commemorates the presidency commencement of Kwame Nkrumah of Ghana, and also the establishment of Trans-Africa Forum within Pan-African tradition. And that rounds out the week for month 10. And rounds out month 10. And so we continue on to month 11. The month begins on day numero 5 of the week. And on that day, Madhya Shahem continues on for the next 2 days. It was truncated because of the structure of the calendar within Zarathustrian calendar. So it concludes on Juma of that week. And Corridor continues within Pan-African tradition, and Inamaka Powwow continues within native tradition. Within Jain tradition, Asad Chaturdasi is observed within Jain tradition. That rounds out the first week of the month. And in month 11, week numero 2, the full moon is observed on Soleil Day, the first day of the week, and within our respective earth traditions. That includes Purnima within Hindu tradition and Upasara within Buddha tradition. That also includes Asala Puja within Buddha tradition as well. Corridor continues within Pan-African tradition. Inamaka continues within Inamaka Powwow continues within native tradition throughout the week. And then later on the week, on day 5 of the week, the martyrdom of the Bab is commemorated within Baha'i tradition. And the month of Zul begins in the Mayan calendar on Juma of that week. And that rounds out the week. Continuing on to month 11, week numero 3. Again, Inamaka Powwow continues within native tradition. Corridor continues within Pan-African tradition. On the first day of the week, on Soleil Day, it is Iwaji, the beginning of the Iwaji festival within Pan-African tradition, and particularly West African tradition as well. And on that same day, first day of the week, Kalimat feast is held within Baha'i tradition. Later that week, on the fourth day of the week, Badan, the month of Badan, begins in the Nanakshi calendar. I did it again. Oh no, I did say summer solstice. At the conclusion of the week on Shabbat, it is Ujama within the corridor, which commemorates the birth of Madiba, Nelson Mandela within Pan African tradition. And that rounds out the week for that week. And then on month Once, week numero cuatro, Amarda, the month of Amarda, begins on the first day of the week in Zoroastrian tradition. Inamakapawa continues within native tradition. Iwaji continues within Pan African tradition. And the corridor continues within Pan African tradition. On the second day of the week is the new moon within respective earth traditions. That includes Amavasya within Hindu tradition and Upasada within Buddha tradition. And the day after that begins the new month within Chinese tradition, which is Lu Yu. And the next day after that is Rosh Chodesh, the beginning of the new month within Israeli tradition, and as well as Zul Hijjah, the beginning of Hajj, and the month of Hijjah, Zul Hijjah, within Islamic tradition, and the holy observance of Hajj during that period. And that continues on through the rest of the week. On the fifth day of the week is Nia amidst the corridor, which commemorates or celebrates the birth of Haile Selassie of Ethiopia. And then on month once, week numero cinco, Hajj continues within Islamic tradition until Juma of that week. Corridor continues within Pan African tradition. Iwaji continues within Pan African tradition, and Powwow Inamaka Powwow continues within Native tradition. Later that week, Yaxki'in, the month of Yaxki'in begins within Mayan calendar, and Hajj concludes. Oh, excuse me, I shouldn't say that. Wait a minute. Nah, Hajj continues through the remainder of the month. Again, the month is concludes before the end of the week, so it can be misleading that way. So that rounds out the month of Onse, the 11th month of the year. And actually, Hajj does conclude on Juma of that week, which is the last day of the month. So that's when Hajj does begin. I was looking to see Id listed, but it's listed the next day. So that concludes the month of Onse. And now we begin month Dose. And that begins on Shabbat, the last day of the week. And so I'll just be, for continuity's sake, I'll say that begins Id al-Adha, the festival of Id within Islamic tradition, within the Hijra calendar. The month of Dose is Dias de las Familias within Holy Earth calendar, and that begins on Shabbat as well that week. And Asad Chaturdasi is listed again. So I'm just going to say it, but again, according to our best information. Freifasi is observed on this day, the first day of the month, which is August, the first day of the month of August. And in the Christian Gregorian calendar, Freifasi is a festival observed within Scandinavian tradition. Lammas is a festival, an observance within Celtic tradition. Corridor continues within Pan-African tradition, and Iwaji continues within Pan-African tradition, and Inamakapawa continues within Native tradition. On month dos, week numero dos, Dias de las Familias continues within Holy Earth tradition. Idul Adha continues within Islamic tradition. Inamakapawa continues within Native tradition. Iwaji continues within Pan-African tradition. Corridor continues within Pan-African tradition as well. On day 3 of the week, Purnima is observed, the full moon within respective earth traditions. Purnima within Hindu tradition, Upasada within Buddhist tradition. On that same day, that full moon is the Iwaji ceremony within Pan-African tradition, and the conclusion of the Iwaji awareness within Pan-African tradition. This also... There's an adjustment that's needed for this. This is actually also the continuation of Vasa, the Rains Retreat. That might sound familiar from the beginning of the calendar. But actually, Vasa, the Rains Retreat, begins after, immediately following Asala Puja. So this is actually a month delayed, my recitation of this. So basically for the past month has been the observance of the Rains Retreat within Buddhist tradition, which is Vasa. And that continues after this full moon here. It's been going on since the previous full moon, so it's just not included with the calendar. Again, it's our best approximations, best information, best approximations, and then also best delivery. Because sometimes there are transcriptual snafus, lapses of concentration additionally. So there's that. So those continue through the rest of the week. Dias de la Familia, Dias de las Familias, Vasa, Corridor, and Inamakapawa, respectively. And then Asu, the month of Asu begins within the Nakshi calendar on Juma of that week. And that rounds out the week. Beginning month dos, week numero tres. Dias de las Familias continues within Holy Earth tradition. Vasa continues within the Rains Retreat, continues within Buddha tradition. Corridor continues within Pan-African tradition. And Powwow, Inamaka Powwow, continues within Native tradition. Later that week, the month of Mold begins within the Mayan calendar. And that rounds out the week. The next week, month dos, week numero cuatro, Dias de las Familias continues within Holy Earth tradition. Vasa continues within the Rains Retreat. Vasa continues within Buddha tradition. Corridor continues within Pan-African tradition. Inamakapawa continues within Native tradition. That second day of the week is Kumbha within Corridor, which commemorates the birth of Marcus Garvey within Pan-African tradition. The day after that is the beginning of the month of Shawwal within Zarathustrian tradition, and the day after that is the beginning of the new moon within respective Earth traditions, and that includes Amavasya within Hindu tradition, Upasada within Buddhist tradition, and Paryushan begins that day within Jain tradition, the period of atonement. And also that day, wow, rather auspicious day. Also that same day is Asma, the feast within Baha'i tradition. And the day after that is the New Year, wow, within Islamic tradition, the Hijra calendar. It is the 1443 in the Hijra calendar that day. And the day after that is Rosh Chodesh, the new month within the Israeli tradition, the Hebrew calendar, and that also begins the month of Elul, which leads up to the high holy days of Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur within the Israeli tradition. That begins again on Juma of that week, and that rounds off the week that week. And then in month doce, week numero cinco, Dias de las Familias continues for the remainder of the month and the remainder of the week, both concluding on the same day, which is Shabbat. Elul continues within Israeli tradition. Vasa continues within Buddha tradition. Corridor continues within Pan-African tradition. And Powwow, Inamaka Powwow continues within Native tradition. The double day, Siete, Heart Day, is observed on day numero tres of that week within Chinese tradition. And Imani, the homecoming of W.E.B. Du Bois, is observed on Juma of that week, the sixth day of the week. And the next day is the observance of Imani, the second day of Imani, which is the I Have a Dream commemoration of the I Have a Dream speech by Martin Luther King. And also on that day, Shabbat, is Ashura, the observance of Ashura within Islamic tradition. And continuing on, we reached the intercalary period. We finished 12 months at this point, and now we're at the intercalary period. And so the intercalary period also begins on the beginning of the beginning of the week, the first day of the week. And so on that day, Elul continues within Israeli tradition. Vasa continues. The Rains Retreat continues within Buddha calendar. Inamaka Powwow continues within Native Earth tradition. On the third day of the week, September begins, the month of September in the Christian Gregorian calendar. On day Cinco of the week, it's the Hungry Ghost Festival within Chinese tradition. That's also the full moon within respect of Earth traditions, and Purnima within Hindu tradition, and Upasara within Buddhist tradition. And that rounds out the week. And concluding the calendar on this intercalary period, the second week of the intercalary period, Elul continues within Israeli tradition. Vasa continues within the Ranged Retreat, which continues within Buddhist calendar. The month of Kartik within the Sikh Ninakshi calendar begins. The Inamaka Powwow continues within native tradition all through the week. And on the second day of the week, it's the Izzat feast. And on the third day of the week, Cha'en, the month of Cha'en begins within the Mayan calendar. And on concluding on the calendar for that year, Elul continues Vasa, within Israeli tradition. The Rains Retreat, Vasa, continues within Buddhist calendar. And the Inamaka Powwow awareness continues within native tradition. All on the last day of the year of the Buddhist calendar. So this particular printout continues for 3 additional months to have some overlap and for the sake of continuity additionally. So basically, it's the same observances that I recited the first time. I don't think there are any observances. I'll say this one that occur on this calendar in the first month that didn't occur on the first calendar of the previous one, because I said every year it's a different thing. But I will say Patish Shahem, the festival of Patish Shahem continues for 5 days in the Zarathustrian calendar. And so there's that. I will also say that the powwow, the Inamaka powwow, concludes on the full moon that occurs later on in the month, with the Mid Autumn Festival that's celebrated within Chinese tradition. Elul concludes with the observance of Rosh Hashanah that occurs at the second week of the month. International Day of Peace. I don't think I said that the first time. International Day of Peace is on the 11th day of the month, and Paryushan concludes on that day, actually, on this particular year, within Jain tradition. I think that's much more to share. So I mentioned before I'm supposed to backtrack and review something that was omitted. Oh, the days of the month for the Mayan calendar. So again, this varies from year to year, but I'm just going to just very quickly say the month of Yax begins on month 1, week Cuatro de Uno. And then the next month of Sak in the Mayan calendar begins on month Dos, week Dos, day Siete, so Shabbat. And then the next month, Ke, begins on month Dos, week Cinco, day Seis of the Holy Earth calendar. And then the next month, Mak, begins on month Tres, week Cuatro, day Cinco of the Holy Earth calendar. So I think that catches up to where we were before. Wow! And I didn't even do any descriptions of the events. Oh, look at that! So I think it's appropriate to leave it at that. So I will say one note. I end this on a positive joint. Today's the last day of the week to like share like business type stuff because mañana is supposed to be lighthearted. I'm gonna try this. I don't know if I'll be able to read a short story before that to share that to like screen it for mañana. So we might just do another testimonial or maybe poetry. Anyways, I'm doing a lot of wiping. That means I'm tired. What I will say is that I was watching something on YouTube, a channel that does football, and they do shorts. By that I mean like short, like instructional videos. or explanatory videos on a lot of different topics about football, but they're interesting. They're kind of quick. There's such music. They're animated. They're drawings. It's not necessarily animated, but they're drawings. So it's simple. It's inexpensive, but it's entertaining. It's informative. It's interesting, and it's brief, like 3 minutes, 4 minutes, whatever. So the consideration is doing something like that for Mélangé. And here we go with another idea, but this is the thing. And again, I have yet to approach a number of places for contributions. Those things I was talking about before on in other venues or other forum about projects and initiatives and endeavors and um, additionally, I've yet to make those approaches, and so there's a consideration of putting together a slight again, and this might be a few weeks in the making because I'm still working on a number of things to finish up at this moment, like the anthology. But putting together like the schematics of like an outline of episodes, but doing instructional videos about being Mélangé, talking about like the different terms, Bruno and Hapa and Mestiza and Creole and Métis and all these things, doing a specific video for each of these, like saying what that is, where the word comes from. Again, 3 minutes, 4 minutes, and giving illustrations to make it entertaining and informative and absorbing, conducive to absorption. Um, but that's just on terms. But then just doing another one like on people, like Mélangé people today that are Mélangé, and like what their experience is. And then doing another one on like historic people who are Mélangé and like legendary people like prophets and sages and ancestors. And then doing another one that are like plural pillars of pluralism. That's something that we do with Mélangé Ethos Institute. Pillars of pluralism. So they might not necessarily be Mélangé per se themselves, but have shared a message within the following that is following. I mean, by people who follow the teachings. That is very much conducive to at least the environment that where Mélangé thrives, an environment where differences are accepted, and we look at things beyond. We look at our ancestry and respect our heritage and our ethnicity, but we also, in terms of cooperating with each other, look at additional criteria and righteousness and ethics and things like that for means of relationship and connection and cooperation. So pillars of pluralism. But then do like fun stuff of like um, music and art and films and stories and additional aspects of the Mélangé experience. But doing an instructional video on each of these different themes. Again, 3 minutes. Do a script that's 3-4 minutes. Um, and animated. Now the thing is, uh, brother Philip Koo is on the first episode of these Café Mélangés, and he's actually connected with an entity or an endeavor. I don't know. It's been a while since it's been years since I've seen anything that I've looked at the channel, but a number of years ago there is, and I think it's still going on. There is an endeavor called Crash Course, I think, that gives like it's basically increasingly educational in terms of like giving history lessons and stuff like that in a very quick animated way. But they are already doing it. But the consideration in this project is doing it in the context of Mélangé with a Mélangé kind of flavor, because the Crash Course thing was nice, but it's very Eurocentric kind of basically. And then it's kind of like the diversity inclined kind of type of Eurocentricity. So it's cool, but still, it's like, yeah, that's not our flavor, or it's not like we see where it's coming from, and it's not like it doesn't look like us. So the consideration is, and they say, oh, Peter, are you representing everybody? Kind of, sort of, but not. So what you want? Um, it's just a matter of having some Mélangé flavor from the roots and sharing the stories in that voice. Um, so, anyways, but collabing with Crash Course, and particularly the animation, the brother Tyler Sammy is involved with Crash Course from what I understand in the previous years. And then when I talked with Philip Koo, I think he was actually on. Well, again, too TMI. Anyways, So that's the consideration. But then we also have additional brethren. Shane, I just mentioned earlier in this joint, part uno of this joint, a couple of hours ago, that Shane Evans is an illustrator. He does digital animation and illustrations, and we have additional brethren who are artists who can be involved in things. But again, we got to put some bread on the table to do that. So again, putting together the schematics and outline of episodes, showing some of the track record of what Melody Ethos is involved with in previous years, but then also showing the work of potential partners in such an endeavor, and then approaching businesses. I've listed a number of businesses before in previous occasions about who are ethical and multicultural and have a vested interest in connecting with constituency, customer base, that is attuned to this. Again, this is something that's appealing and applicable to a general audience, but our focus with Melanger Ethos Institute is focusing in specific metropolitan areas. 20. I missed on the previous list. I missed Habana, Cuba, and land of the Taino. Um, I might have to go through that list again. But anyways, that's what we're focusing on: connecting with communities, actual um, communities, physical communities within our respective locales, and building the economics and communication, and additionally accordingly. So, anyways, anything we would do with the sponsors, the contributors, the investors, is with that mindset as well. So rather than just trying to appeal to a large, broad audience where the market share is desirable, it's a matter of like we're looking at these communities, and so yes, it may appeal to that, but and you can do whatever algorithms, hashtags, or whatever that's appropriate to cater to that, but we're focusing in these specific areas to this audience, not with the intention of getting big numbers, but big relationships. And uh, that behooves you as well, because that includes that constitutes an increasingly stable and reliable customer base, and better word of mouth uh, marketing for enduring sales relationship. So I'm a salesperson. I saw an interesting sales video yesterday as well. What's she doing? Yeah, that's another story. Brother in Singapore actually is doing that. Might be about to hit him up and get his thoughts about this, because I'm a diplomat. I ain't a salesperson. I'm one of the worst salespeople, because I got to take a no for an answer, and I can't push a yes. So anyway, I got to say yes for the most part, unless I got a beneficial reason or a strong reason otherwise. Now that being said, I do have a strong reason to saying sayonara at this point. I'll say the 20 cities if I can quickly. We got we got Shanghai, Bangkok, Mumbai, Jeddah, Kubenhavn, and Nuremberg, Roma, Santa Lorenzo, Yerushalayim, French Hill, Addis Ababa, Accra, Liberdade, land of Guarani, Santo Terra, Guadalajara, in the land of the Mayan, Oleon, Berkeley, UNI Village, in the land of the Cuyahoga, Singapore, Tokyo, London, Manchester. No, excuse me, whoa, just Manchester. Um, uh, Habana, in the land of the Taino, Potomac, Washington, D.C. Uh, had it for a second. Had it for a second. I'll say Honolulu, Hawaii. There's one additional one. Flip it like this. There's one additional one I'm missing. Huh. Kosa, Cape Town, South Africa. Those are the 20 cities that we're focusing on in terms of building and connecting with villages and communicating cooperation additionally. With that being said, ho ho, that's a marathon right there. Who's gonna watch that? We'll see. Oh, speaking on that, who's gonna watch that? Hey, I was looking at the I did the live stream yesterday, and it posts automatically, so I don't have to worry about that. But I did review it. I did go to view it to see if the audio was effective or whether it's necessary to post the recording that I did of it. The audio sounds decent. It does skip a little bit, but it's feasible. It's not worth it posting this an additional joint. Now that being said, as I was going to look at it, guess what? There was a view. Oh, how'd that happen? um, so even before I do it, somebody watched it. So that tells me, well, I already know cats are keeping track of what's going on. So I already knew that. But officially, there's a view on the day it was done. So two things that occurred to me. Either one, somebody that I reached out to, I've sent emails. I have yet to like push it tough, and I'm actually even still I have yet to do. Even with the next couple of weeks, I'm working on other things, so I tend to like abstain from pushing it too tough. Still, um, the mixed heritage discussion group that we are convening in person here in the Cuyahoga area is a priority for me at the moment in terms of promoting. And so that's where my promotional efforts are dedicated for the next week or two. Um, but I did send out an email for the Café Mélangé for these joints, and I don't know if maybe somebody responded, checked out the live stream. There has yet to be anybody popping on to the conference call, but maybe they checked out the live stream. Um, didn't let me know. So, but to let me know like what they think and like is it worth how to make it better, this and the other. Because again, these aren't supposed to be presentations. These are supposed to be just like combo joints and like I'm supposed to be like the barista or something like that. Just like sending like what would you like and okay, I'm gonna keep on doing what I'm doing. So, anyways, at the moment, these are presentations because that's effectively how it is. So, if I'm gonna do it, what's gonna make people interested and what's gonna people make people want to like continue to like tune in. So at the moment, I'm doing it to do it and to be consistent, to be a continual presence, and share messages. And I got lots and lots and lots of, to share. And I'm thinking like a lot of stuff that I share in these joints can be made into the videos I was talking about with the animation joints, the illustration joints. So, but I've been doing this for years and years and years. I got lots and lots and lots to talk about. Some that's off the wall, some that's on the wall, some that's building the wall. So it's helpful to get insight about like what's appropriate, what's resonate, what's vibing with people, what's popping. So so I see the viewer like, oh, tell me what you think. What's going on? What's happening? Um, so yeah, one or two things. Don't know if uncertain, unclear whether it's somebody that I've reached out to and that they actually like checked it out when at the hour that I said I was going to do it, and I actually did it at that point, or whether it is somebody who found out about it through the algorithm uh, machinery and tuned in to see it. Um, there aren't any. I'm the only subscriber to Café Mélangé, so there's no notifications that way. People that I've shared are yeah, so that speaks for itself. I'm uncertain. I would imagine. I have less familiarity with the Google algorithms and how it works and everything, and like what bumps things and this and the other. But um, there's less estimation on that front. However, and then there's another possibility of people who follow what I do on other joints being aware of this and tuning in, even without me providing direct notification. All that being said, interesting. All that over one view. You getting giddy over one view. Right. Namaste, assalamu alaikum, shalom, zaijian, adios, te chakaris, esempe na asamudwo, kele ufed. One love and peace.